Hello, I am Sister Kathleen Schipani from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. I am the director of the Office for Persons with Disabilities and the Deaf Apostolate, and I'm very happy to be joining virtually for the Community for All conference. My workshop is Cyber Catechesis, We Can Adapt, Part 1. There will be a Part 2, and I hope you can join me for that. That will be focused on strategies and resources. Right now, I'd like to share my screen with you, so be patient for a moment. Cyber Catechesis, We Can Adapt, discovering ways that virtual formats and sacramental prep in itself can foster belonging. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. My first job was with young people who had intellectual disabilities at Donguanella Village. I was a lifeguard. And from that experience, all through most of my religious and professional life, my interaction, encounter, and friendships with people with disabilities have shaped my understanding of who they are and who I am, and what the church mission is in regards to people with disabilities. It also was my experience at Donguanella Village that helped me to discern my vocation to become a sister in the Sister Servants of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And all throughout my professional career of teaching Catholic school, teaching in special education, being an administrator, one thing that was consistent was that I was always a catechist and always teaching a group of young people their faith. And most often they were young people who had disabilities. I'd like to begin by taking a big picture view of what is catechesis and helping me to reflect on that. I used the directory for catechesis that was just promulgated in 2020. So what shapes our understanding of catechesis? First of all, we know that the goal of catechesis is really to encounter Christ and to assist, to provide an environment and an opportunity for those we catechize to encounter Christ. So we accompany them. It's true that catechesis involves education, but it's not only education, and it's definitely not only cognitive education. It's really assisting and forming people in their faith and so that they can be transformed, formed in the faith and for the faith that they can be active participants, particularly in celebrating the mystery of our faith, which is the sacraments and our weekly Sunday liturgy of Eucharist. That engagement enables us and enables those we catechize to truly encounter Christ and also to belong to the body of Christ, the church, the community. It also influences how we live and how we view our human life and destiny, ours and also those we catechize. And that view of human life and our common destiny, I think, is really critical when we regard people with disabilities who are, like us, creatures made in God's image. We share the same dignity and destiny. And that is a universal call to holiness, which finds its fulfillment in our destiny in God's kingdom. And we know that in order for us to be accompanied to that eternal destiny, the sacraments are so vital and important. And they really become an efficacious sign of what they really affect in us. And that is that they are an encounter with Christ that binds us and unites us in the body of Christ, the church. In this picture here, we see an old picture of me with Bishop Welsh, and that was in the later 70s. And Bishop Welsh had come to me to say that when he arrived in Arlington Diocese, that there was a stack of letters on his desk, and many of them were from families who had older teens and young adults with disabilities who never had a way to be prepared to receive the sacraments. And he asked me if I could assist him in doing that. Now that was in the 70s, but I have to say that in my position here at the Archdiocese, it's oftentimes that I get calls from parents who have the same experience of not being able to find a catechetical program that will adapt to the needs of their child or young person with a disability. I want to go back to this slide related to catechesis and just really emphasize something that's really vital. The directory for catechesis, as does the National Directory for Catechesis, draws from Gaudium et Spes in reminding us that the law for evangelization and the model for catechesis is to faithfully adapt the genuine message of the gospel, the good news of God's redeeming love, to faithfully adapt that. So good and faithful catechesis accommodates the proclamation of the revealed word to meet each person, taking into account the full spectrum of diverse circumstances and situations, including age, intellectual development, psychological conditions, and spiritual maturity. That's catechesis for all people, is to be adapted and accommodated. So what we do with people with disabilities as we accompany them is the ordinary part of our role as catechists, to adapt and to accommodate so that those that we catechize can encounter Christ and come to their common destiny of holiness and union with God, ultimately in heaven. So the sacraments are a great gift, and they are God's gift to us. We don't earn them. Pope Francis tells us that before all else, I strongly reaffirm the right of persons with disabilities to receive the sacraments like all other members of the Church. He further states that all liturgical celebrations in the parish should be accessible to them, so that together with brothers and sisters, each of them can deepen, celebrate, and live their faith. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. How can we deepen, celebrate, and live our faith using this virtual format that all of us have become more familiar with within the last 8 months? Here in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia and in many places, there's been a few formats being used for religious education. Cyber catechesis of youth using a virtual format weekly, and relying on sometimes home catechesis with a possible virtual hybrid support given to the parents so that they can catechize their children. In some cases, possibly people are still doing face-to-face catechesis during this time. We're not in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, especially since the recent surge in COVID. I first want to talk about some accommodations that can be helpful to children and youth who have learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder, who might be in the typical class formation and meeting the catechist with, possibly 8 or 10 other children or even a larger group. And what would be some helps? And for sure, they would probably have some struggles with this format. What parents tell me is that what is needed is often reading support. And that's possible because there's tech readers. So we could suggest to the parent, are they using tech readers in school, and can that be used in the catechetical virtual learning environment? Or can a buddy in the classroom be at times when you break into rooms, the reading buddy? Can you divide, once you're on the class in Zoom, could you divide it up so that everyone has a reading buddy, another person in the class, or invite some high school or other adults to be those reading buddies during a certain part of the virtual class? Giving alternate ways of responding to assignments. Instead of writing or using the keyboard to text something, Could students who have learning disabilities or attention deficit disorder and maybe sensory integration difficulties just use an oral format using a phone, a mobile phone, or an iPad with an app where they can record their oral response, or video gestures or pictures for their response. Of course, for children with learning disabilities and attention deficit, we need more structure and possibly more follow-up, more positive feedback, and of course, more patience. But one thing that really helps is just shortening the time of the lesson, doing it in possibly 15 or 20-minute chunks, maybe twice a week, rather than the 45 minutes or the hour, or doing just a short religious ed on the virtual format and having the parent follow up with some support and coaching. For learners who have intellectual developmental disabilities and complex disabilities or autism, both of these models can work. And we just need to partner with the parents to see which one works best, whether it's cyber catechesis weekly or maybe twice a month with some home catechesis, or is it home catechesis with the parent being the catechist and the catechist and the catechetical leader virtually meeting up with the parent to provide them with support and coaching. We have some feedback and some research on what seems to work with individuals with disabilities and their families report. And this is through Rights Law, who a few months into the pandemic surveyed parents who were using virtual learning in the general education arena. And they responded to 3,000 families responded in 49 states to their survey. And what they found out was that families preferred synchronous learning on a virtual format rather than pre-recorded format. So synchronous learning, 64% said that they had a positive experience with them, whereas only 36% said they had a positive experience with asynchronous, pre-recorded, or packet learning. Lessons learned from the responses, and there were over 10,000 comments to this survey. And some of the things were the same comments. As I mentioned, more parents preferred real-time Zoom synchronous learning. However, there were a few who stated that pre-recorded worked for them and fit into their family situation better. And they could assess when their child with a disability could, was calm and ready to do a 15 or 20-minute pre-recorded lesson. For sure, interactive learning worked best, and especially learning that involved fun activities or novel activities or engaging activities that had movement and hands-on parts to it. Communication with the teacher was desired and helpful. Assistance and training with the platform being used was stated as very, very important. Parents requested that time be spent to teach them how to use the format or the platform. And that also parents really enjoyed and found helpful engaging with the teacher and the teacher teaching the parent the strategy that was going to be used or the concept that was going to be taught so that they could reinforce it with the parent. So you may be familiar with these terms, synchronous and asynchronous learning. But this third option of supporting parents in teaching their children using real-time FaceTime or Zoom meetings with parents, brief, to show them one strategy or one concept with some ways of teaching that to their child. Some other parent feedback included this. Parents, and this was direct feedback to me, parents felt that a time of ritual type prayer, simple short psalms or praying intercessions help to focus children, particularly children with disabilities, whether it be just a refrain like God's love is with me always. It was interesting because some of the parents told me that in their regular general ed days, they would use some of the things they learned from their religious ed Zoom, such as a little time of prayer and quiet before they began their general education lesson. So I was really encouraged by hearing that. Parents said, be visual, use pictures, use yes and no responses that could be yes and no, or yes and no hand gestures, or using things like little whiteboards that, a happy face can be drawn on, or a sad face could be drawn on, or a picture response could be used. And sometimes just choosing the answer by putting an X on it or a circle on it. Parents said that it was really important, particularly on a virtual format, to have wait times so that the child who might have processing issues can have the time to process before they respond, so that giving everyone a wait time of 5 seconds before they show their response on the board, those kinds of things were very helpful to them. And that their child really enjoyed seeing familiar face, particularly the familiar face of a catechist and other children, and that they loved getting personal video messages from their teachers and aides using formats like Flipgrid, or just texting a short video or auditory message to the parent's phone that would be shared with the child. One of the features that I want to just mention to you that was helpful with some of our catechists is using social learning platforms such as Flipgrid. If you're not familiar with it, I really challenge you to try to learn how to use it. You can go to ditchthetextbook.com and it will give you some instructions of how to use something like Flipgrid and some other social learning platforms. This simply enables the catechist to organize the lesson, and also possibly if they're using some pre-recorded instruction, or even if they're using synchronous instruction, they could just have videoed 1 or 2 little questions or some instruction to the parent to respond to or explain the homework. And then the child, parent, or family can respond by just clicking the video icon and responding, or showing, doing a show and tell with something that the child has completed, rather than them sending it to you as an attachment. It's a kind of fun, interactive way that I challenge you to think about using. So for the virtual format, planning goes the same in some ways as when we're meeting youth in person. We do outreach, we decide the platform, we decide the logistics. Again, permission forms and things like that for the use of video, especially if the video is being recorded. We plan the lesson and we practice the IT, and then after we readjust after each lesson. Pope Benedict, when he authored the introduction to the UCAT, said that you need to know your faith with the same precision with which you know IT, with which an IT specialist knows the inner working of a computer. And I came to realize during these last few months that as a catechist, I need to know the inner working of the computer and various virtual platforms and their features in the same way that I am passionate about knowing my faith and how to pass on the faith, so that these new technologies can be in service to the good news that we are proclaiming. So we need to know our learners, we need to know the lesson and the concept, but we need to know the platform and its features. And I want to share a few features with you. One of them is using whiteboard and annotation. So if you've never used whiteboard, you might not have noticed that when you go to share your screen, one of the options that you have is whiteboard, and you click on that. When you click on it, click on also annotate. It either appears above the sharing bar, or sometimes it appears, depending on what type of computer you're using, as a drop down. You see the yellow line pointing out annotate, a really fun feature to use with kids. And then, so you share your screen, you click whiteboard, you tell the class to click view options, or you ask the parent or guardian to assist the child in clicking annotate in the view options. Then you can use all these fun things that are on this annotation bar below. I like to particularly use draw, but stamps are really fun for kids who might not have really great control of their fine muscle skills. So they just click stamp to respond to a question that you ask, or a selection that you might have that you placed on the whiteboard. I'm going to show you quickly some of my colleagues using whiteboard. I asked them the question, who is your favorite saint? And then asked them for the first time, you can see they're a little slow responding, to click on draw and then write their responses. And you'll see them beginning to do that as I'm speaking. I'm signing because typically I'm teaching children who are deaf and some who have other disabilities. So they begin to try to find their drawing feature, and they begin writing some of their saints. A few of them are playing around with the stamp feature, as you can see. And someone is writing the Saint Monica. Actually, the drawing feature takes a little longer to get control of, as does the text feature, but it'll just all depends on what your goal is. And but using these features enables you to have the young people be interactive, not just listening and watching, but to be interactive. Another way of using shared screen is to prepare a document, as you would normally do if you were in person. And I'm just going to show this. This is creation, God made, people made. And you're going to see my colleagues responding. So the same thing, you click share screen, then you bring up the document that you've already prepared and that you have on your screen, and then you tell the class to click view options and select annotate. And then they're able to draw or use the stamp, or some may prefer text and they might type the word fish or the word water or the word flower. So just another feature that can be really helpful to you when you're doing virtual catechesis. I want to talk about views. So I think all of us now have become somewhat familiar with gallery view or speaker view. Oftentimes I'm with a small group of children who are deaf, 4 or 5, and the gallery view works really well. But if you have more, it could be very difficult for children to attend to who's speaking if you're not in the speaker view. But a really wonderful thing took place a few months ago. Zoom created another view, which is called multi-pin. And it specifically was developed because of people who were deaf needing to pin their interpreter next to their speaker so that they could see 2 or 3 people, like both interpreters as well as the speaker. But educators are using this view and assisting students themselves or their parent who might be supporting them while they're in their virtual religious ed to pin the teacher and pin one or two of the children as well as the child themselves, so that they're not seeing, so that they can choose who they see and it becomes larger. A teacher could use this by saying to a larger group, all right, they could ask a question and then they could say, I'm going to choose two people to respond to that and pin both of those and engage them in the teaching activity while everyone else is watching, and then switch who is pinned at various times. Just encourage you. It's another feature, and for some students, it is very helpful to them. Adaptive materials used for the preparation for sacraments. Many of you are familiar with Loyola Press adaptive sacramental kits. So you might wonder how to use those in a virtual environment. I want to show you a clip of me using these. I send home a box with the learning activities to the student who I'm teaching, and then I mirror to them what it is I'm using until they're used to using it, and proceed with the lesson like that. I'm going to show you a quick clip of that. I'm going to kind of go fast. You can see me signing. Oswaldo is deaf and has autism. He doesn't use a lot of signs. He uses more gestures, but he's very good at following and very good at showing me by using pictures what it is he knows. So let me see if I can bring that a little bit further. And you can see some of the lesson. I think it's freezing a bit, and his response. But what made this very helpful is having him have the learning activity at home and me modeling it from where I'm teaching. You can see he's very happy to show me his responses. You may notice that he has his mom sitting next to him, assisting sometimes for him to pay attention, but also then his mother and his dad can follow up on that activity that we did together and modeled. I think I'm frozen. Okay, let me just go back. A resource that I want to share with you now related to the sacraments is this wonderful resource called Awakening Spiritual Dimensions. Father William Gillen just recently did an update of this, and it's very concrete, sacramental, symbolic catechesis that's very simple and used with individuals who I've pictured here with complex disabilities, oftentimes without a lot of use of language. And while it is meant to be done in a communal setting, it is also something that can be utilized virtually, but it would take some preparation so that before the catechist meets the individual or group of individuals, you would need to indicate to the parent the kinds of things that they would need, such as the use of a cross, or to have, in this case, a flower or something from nature. So it is always concrete based with concrete things that are symbols of our faith. And then from that symbol of the faith, the concept is drawn from that. And then there's times of prayer. So this could be a lovely way of utilizing the model of sensory and symbolic catechesis with people with disabilities through the virtual method. I want to conclude by saying that we can adapt. And as for ecclesial institutions, the church, I reiterate the need to make available suitable and accessible means for handing on the faith. I also hope that these can be made available to those who need them, cost-free, to the extent possible, also through the new technologies that have proven so important for everyone in the midst of this pandemic. Pope Francis said these words in December, and that lovely bell you hear indicates that I've come to the end of my 30 minutes. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be providing some handouts that you will be able to access. So God bless you, and I hope to see you at part 2.